Hey everyone! ChatGP Taylor aka Taylor here. Welcome back to the channel. Today will be a continuation of the Disventure Camp Top 5 series. This series counts down my top 5 lists of certain topics related to Disventure Camp. Last time, I talked about 5 advantages that I would like to see added into future Disventure Camp seasons. This video will look at something different. If there are any ideas for this series that you would like to see me play out, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And with that, let's get started. Before I begin, make sure to like and subscribe if this video is to your liking, and make sure to comment down below if there's anything that you would like to see going forward. Today's topic is something that's pretty relevant considering the current season of Disventure Camp. The topic of choice is 5 Disventure Camp non-all-stars that could return. We all knew the hype surrounding the cast reveal for Disventure Camp All Stars. There were some campers that we were happy to see return for the season. But there were also some campers that we were surprised to see omitted from the season. This video is dedicated to the non-all-star campers that I think have the potential to make a big difference in a future season. Maybe it can happen during a fans versus favorite season. Maybe it can happen during a coaches season. But either way, the following 5 campers are the ones that I think have the highest chance of having an incredible storyline written for them if they were to return for a future season. Unlike the previous list, I will be counting back from number 5 to number 1, with number 1 being the camper that I feel has the highest potential for a strong storyline if they were to return. And with that, let's start with number 5. The number 5 camper on my list is Maggie. To be completely truthful, I don't think Maggie will return for a future season, and I don't think Maggie needs to return either. I'm happy with her story ending the way it did in season 2. But if Maggie were to return for a future season, I think there's a good storyline that can be written for her. Recall from season 2 where she mentioned that it's hard for her to make friends. So in her returning season, her storyline would revolve around how she may have changed after her season 2 appearance with regards to her confidence and socializing ability. Imagine it's a coach's season and Maggie returns as a coach. During this time, Maggie shares her experiences about how she was able to overcome adversity during her first season and how she's been able to make more friends since her original appearance on the show. Maybe she will end up mentoring a camper who is going through similar problems that she went through during her original season. Not only does this allow for Maggie's caring, friendly nature to come through, but this also allows for character development because it will show how Maggie is more capable of talking and conversing with strangers than she was in the past. And if she ends up mentoring a camper that completely disagrees with her advice, she may be able to settle the dispute herself instead of having someone else come to her defense, showcasing more character development in the process. This plot and the ability for Maggie to grow from her original appearance on the show is why she made it into the top 5. But the reason why I don't have her any higher is because I think that everyone higher than her on the list has a greater likelihood of actually returning to the show for another season. Again, I don't think Maggie needs to return, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if she did come back. The number 4 camper on my list is Drew. When I see people talk about Drew, it's usually either them falling completely in love with his character, or them talking about how he was a necessary filler character to give others more time to develop. I understand the perspective of how he was a filler character due to his early elimination and the lack of explanation regarding his background. But it's these factors that give Drew the potential to return for a future season. Having Drew return for a future season would not only allow him to avenge his previous early elimination, but it would also allow us viewers to learn more about Drew's background and personality. All things considered, we didn't learn much about Drew's personality or backstory in season 1. Due to this, the possibilities for the writers to expand and develop Drew's personality and backstory are probably more numerous than it is for the other campers in this series. Maybe we could learn about his backstory and how he grew up. Maybe we can learn about how his method of communication has affected his family, social, and school lives. There are just so many things that the writers can do with his character since we don't have very much information on him. And what if his method of communication has impacted or been impacted by his personality? Since he doesn't communicate vocally, what if this prompted him to become a strong listener, allowing him to serve as a support figure for people in his life? And what if this carries over to the show, where he's able to help emotionally support the other campers when necessary? Imagine a scenario where a camper's best friend was just voted out, and that camper starts venting to Drew, with Drew giving advice through his notepad. Not only does this allow the two of them to form a stronger bond, but it allows the audience to get a deeper look into Drew's personality and the kind of person that he chooses to be. I really like Drew, and the numerous ways in which he could be written for a future season is why I have him in my top 5 above Maggie. But the reason why I don't have him higher is because I feel like the campers above Drew are more likely to return, and I also feel like there are clear storylines that could be followed for each of the campers above Drew, while Drew tends to have more options for his development that aren't as clear. And I'll explain what I mean by that as I talk about number 3 on my list. The number 3 camper on my list is Nick. I've seen mixed opinions regarding Nick's character. Some people think his early elimination was deserved considering how far he made it in the beta version of Season 1. Other people think that Nick was robbed and that he deserves a chance at redemption. I think there's potential for Nick to return for a future season, and if he does, I think there are a couple routes that the writers could take to help build on Nick's character. The routes that the writers could take would primarily address Nick's life after his Season 1 appearance. In Episode 1, Nick talked about how he lived a sheltered life and recently left his parents' home after having an argument with them. If Nick were to return for a future season, his story could focus on how leaving his parents' home has impacted his life. If his life was impacted in a positive way, Nick could talk about how he's been able to explore the world on his own accord and what he's taken away from these explorations. Maybe he's been able to find his true passion in life now that he's been able to explore what the world has to offer. Maybe he's become a florist or something. Maybe his new life experiences have helped him appreciate the value of others, allowing him to maintain more positive relationships with his teammates, which contrasts with how he ended his Season 1 tenure. In general, going down this route would probably give Nick a more positive perception in the Disventure Camp community, which may not be a bad thing. But what if his life was impacted in a negative way? In this scenario, Nick could talk about how he had to learn some tough lessons that he didn't get to learn earlier in life due to his sheltered upbringing. Maybe being on his own forced him to become a stronger, more motivated individual in order to prevent people from taking advantage of him. This could be further compounded if he's embarrassed at how Fiore was able to manipulate him during Season 1. This could even be the start of a villain arc for Nick, fueled by how he's finally taking his fate into his own hands and working hard to win something for himself. Instead of being motivated by the money, maybe he just wants to prove that he's capable of accomplishing something on his own, which could even resonate with some of the viewers. These two possible routes as well as Nick's higher likelihood of returning is what put him above Drew on my top 5 list. But the reason why I don't have him higher on the list is because I think the campers above him on my list are even more likely to return for a future season if the possibility arises. I'm not saying that Nick isn't likely to return, but I think the campers above him are more likely to be called upon to make a return in order to bring some resolution to their stories. Now for number 2, I kind of cheated. Instead of having only one camper at this ranking, I have 2 campers. The reason why I have 2 campers at this ranking is because even though these campers could technically receive further development on their own, I think their development would be more impactful if they were paired together. And with that being said, I have Lil and Carol as the number 2 campers on my list. The reason why I feel like these two can be developed together is because they seem to be opposites with regards to their demeanor. These opposing traits may allow them to help the other person develop in areas in which they personally excel. For Lil, she's a Girl Scout troop leader. She's honorable, she genuinely cares about the people that she's aligned with, she tries to maintain positive relationships with others in life, and she hopes to set a good example for those in her Girl Scout troop. But she ended up falling victim to Fiore, who took advantage of her calm, caring, non-confrontational demeanor. While for Carol, she's tenacious, vocal, she's not afraid to fight to get what she wants, she doesn't really get along with others, and she understands that she may have to lose a few friends in order to succeed in life, knowing that not everyone has her best interests in mind. There's a clear opposition in character between the two of them. Therefore, the two of them can use their strengths in order to help the other person become a stronger, better person. Carol can help Lil become more tenacious and less susceptible to being taken advantage of, and Lil can help Carol become more sociable and realize that pure aggression isn't always the best way to live. Lil doesn't have to become a cutthroat manipulator, and Carol doesn't have to become super sweet. But in my opinion, a storyline of the two of them becoming friends and helping each other become better people would be a pleasant sight in a chaotic show like Disventure Camp. An added benefit to these two developing as a duo is that it allows for more solid bonds to be formed between casts from different generations. We're seeing a little bit of this in Disventure Camp All Stars. Connor and Alec are starting to bond, Tom and Aiden are starting to bond, and of course Yul and Gret have bonded quite a bit. So having Carol and Lil work together as a pairing is just another example of how campers from different seasons can have great interactions with each other. That's probably a big reason why I have it so high on my list. But the reason why it's not number 1 is because I genuinely think that the storyline that I'm going to suggest for the number 1 camper could actually happen if they were to return for a future season, and I think it would be an amazing sight to see if the writers chose to go in this direction. And with that, let's get to number 1. The number 1 camper on my list will probably result in differing opinions depending on how you feel about this camper. The top spot on my list belongs to the one, the only, Dan. Now, I've seen a lot of criticism thrown Dan's way after his Season 1 appearance, primarily oriented towards his perceived lack of impact on the game despite competing in 7 episodes. Some might look at that and think that Dan doesn't have potential. But if you ask me, I think this is the perfect setup for an incredible storyline if Dan were to return for a future season, and I'll explain why. One thing that we learned from Disventure Camp All Stars is that the returning campers have been affected by the viewers' perception of them. A perfect example is with Ali, who was greatly affected by the hate that she received after competing on season 2. Now, I have seen a decent amount of Ali hate, but when comparing it to the Dan hate that I've seen, it's not that bad. I'm not trying to downplay Ali's criticism, I'm just trying to say that Dan has received a lot of criticism from his appearance. If campers are able to be impacted by public perception, and if Ali was affected by the criticism she received, imagine how Dan feels with all the criticism he's received after his appearance in season 1. Also, Ali admitted that her willingness to work with Fiore is partially so she won't receive as much hate for not thinking strategically, so it's not unreasonable to believe that Dan could do something similar in a future season. Imagine it's a fans versus favorites season. All the favorites show up one by one and all the fans cheer for them. And then Dan shows up and no one cheers for him. Maybe one of the fans whispers to another fan and asks, was he even on the show? The first few episodes of the season would focus on Dan's frustration that no one respects or remembers him after his first season, and how this time, he's determined to make sure that no one forgets who he is. This could be the start of a true villain arc for Dan. His desire to win is no longer the money. It's the glory of showing everyone that he is a legitimate competitor and that anyone who doubted his presence is a fool. Putting his know-it-all status to use, he could become one of the most cutthroat, merciless, backstabbing strategists in the history of reality television. And if anyone has watched the real-life reality show known as Big Brother, we know how merciless people named Dan are capable of being. Can you imagine Dan pulling off his own version of the legendary moment known as Dan's funeral? It would be insane, which is why I have Dan at number 1 on my list. And that about does it for this video. What did you think of the video? Do you agree with my ranking? Do you disagree? What storylines do you think could be used for these campers if they were to return for a future season? Either way, please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like the video, click subscribe if you really like the video, and for some ending words of wisdom. Always carry a spare notebook with you, because you never know when someone will steal your main notebook, use it to scare someone into voting for you, and ruin your chances at $1 million. Thank you, and farewell.